Welcome, my name is Jeff Malmgren. I work with the Burnaby Primary Care Networks. The Burnaby Primary Care Networks are hosting this Doc Talks, which is all about the COVID-19 vaccine, or as much as we possibly know at the moment. Really happy to welcome Dr. Birinder Narang and Dr. Baldev Sanghera to join us for this session. Dr. Narang is a family physician working in Burnaby, East Vancouver, and New Westminster. He practices in a number of settings, including community health centers, residential care, hospitals, and walk-in clinics. He practices in various locations, but Burnaby is where his heart is. He grew up in Burnaby and completed elementary school, high school, and his undergraduate degree here. He traveled to Australia to study medicine and complete family medicine training in 2016 at the University of Manitoba. Dr. Sanghera has been a family physician in Burnaby since 1998. He's one of the founding directors of the Prime Care Medical Center. And he is also the medical director for the UPCC at Edmonds, as well as for the COVID testing, assessment, and primary care site at Central Park. He graduated from UBC Faculty of Medicine, went on to complete his family medicine residency training at UBC as chief resident of the city program. He also lives and works in Burnaby and strives to make Burnaby a healthier community. He encourages proactive care to his patients and to help them achieve their health goals. So really happy to have both of you here. I'll turn it over now to Dr. Narang to kick off the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us, Jeff, and to the entire Primary Care Network initiative. We're glad to be here, and we're hoping to provide a bit of information in this ever-expanding space. So I know the most common question is going to be, when are we getting our vaccines? And literally, we don't know. We know that we wish we could tell you we have an idea of what the provincial strategy is, but we know that it is all dependent on the supply chains, and that Canada doesn't have our own manufacturing capacity right now. And we know that the last few weeks, we've all heard in the media how there have been interruptions in those supplies temporarily. Now, what we're hearing is that we're still on track by the end of March to get where we are, but we'll have to see. So what I will do, though, is I will just do a brief review of what the province has introduced as their plan. And then, we can then adapt it. And, I anticipate this is going to be the first in a series of updates over the next few months, and we'll do our best to keep you all informed. And even this, I prepared the slide deck last night, and we know there was just a massive briefing from Dr. Henry. So we'll try to include some updates from that if we can. Next slide, please. Sure. So this is the outline. What is the plan right now? What do we know about the current vaccines? And we know that these aren't going to be the only vaccines that we will be giving out in British Columbia. So what's on the horizon? And then we took some commonly asked questions, and we did receive some. So thanks to everyone who did send in your questions beforehand. So we will try to address those. So we'll try to do a common FAQ first, and then we'll try to get to your individual questions. And I believe the chat function is open if you do want to submit questions, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, there's a Q&A function that we hope people will use. It actually, if you can put your questions in the Q&A, that would be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Awesome. Next slide, please. So where are we at in COVID right now? We know that in BC, we've had almost 70,000 cases total. We're still seeing anywhere between 400 to 500 cases most days. We know some days have gone up, but the average virtually for the last month has been plateaued, but starting to come down. We know here in the Fraser Health region, we've seen dramatic improvements in the last 3 months, where back in October, November, we were driving the cases in British Columbia, unfortunately, and we were up to 70% of the cases every day. But now we're down to consistently in the low 40%. So I think that's a great achievement of everyone in the Fraser Health community. We're on the right track, and we need to keep doing that. Dr. Sanghera, I know you had a chance to listen to Dr. Henry's briefing this morning. So is there anything that you think that our group here today would benefit from hearing?
Thanks, Dr. Narang. Yes, absolutely. And what I would like to do is actually appreciate everybody's hard work in the last few months and bringing those high numbers down and reducing the transmissibility of the virus within the Fraser Health region and across the Lower Mainland. We are seeing some spikes, but they seem to be in some of the other jurisdictions. But we certainly are seeing a gradual reduction in the numbers here in the Lower Mainland. One of the things that Dr. Henry had mentioned is that we are seeing this potential risk coming at us from these new variants that some of you may have heard about. We have the original virus that came to cause the pandemic. And as viruses continue to spread throughout the world, viruses have a tendency to want to spread further, so they mutate. And as they mutate, they can then become either more dangerous or more transmissible, or they may fizzle out. And in this case, we've got at least 3 variants that are causing some more concern for all of us. There's a UK variant, a South African variant, and a Brazilian variant. We have seen that the UK variant has caused a lot of turmoil in the UK. It's actually resulting in a 3rd wave that they're having to deal with severe lockdowns in the UK. And South African variant has been also something that's causing some concerns. And now the Brazilian variant has been causing some increase in numbers in Brazil and in other South American countries. We first noticed these variants appearing on our shores about a month ago. And in that time, going from 1 case, we've now increased up to 28 cases as of today. What that means for us is that the lockdown and restrictions, guidelines that were provided to us by Dr. Henry for restricted social interactions up till February 8th will continue till the end of the month. We need to continue to keep social interactions down to 40 to 50% of normal levels in order to prevent transmission and to reduce the positivity rates. So that's where the main gist of this guidance today was. We are hoping that we can roll out more of the vaccines that will give us all some protection, but it really does come down to maintaining our physical distancing from everyone, making sure that we are wearing our masks appropriately when we are in any situation other than our immediate household, and we continue to wash our hands.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Sanghera. And if we can go on to the next slide. So this is just a representation that I got from a Grand Rounds lecture that I attended for the BCCDC. And this is just a graphical representation. So if you can see here, this is the first wave here. And, you know, looking back on it, they're really just calling it a blip now, because we never saw the impact of COVID in BC until later in the fall. And where are we at right now is that we're still seeing about 7 to 8 times higher the cases that we saw compared to this mid-March when we were a few weeks into it. And we're still seeing a lot of deaths. So 2 to 3 higher number of deaths compared to when we in this first wave. And that's why the restrictions are still in. We know that there's going to be a lag time, and once we get this short-term protection from vaccination, and we know right now the best way to save lives today, February 5th in BC, is to do all the things that Dr. Sanghera just mentioned with the distancing, masking, and hygiene. And that's going to be the same going forward. Even once we get vaccinated, we're still going to have to do that until everyone in the community is safe. And until we get that guidance from the province as well. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know that the goal is really to get to your questions. This is information that's easily available on the BC government website now. You just look at BC COVID Vaccination Plan, and it's all laid out there, what groups they're in, what groups they've established and where we're at. So we're still in phase 1. And saying that, like, where we are seeing that while we're still expecting to start phase 2 in February, it looks like it might be pushed towards the end of the month. Phase 2 is going to be seniors in the community, so not in residential care, not in assisted living, but those living at home with family members. And those are the people who right now in the community are still most at risk. That Indigenous patients and population above the age of 65 and other community healthcare workers as well, and vulnerable populations. Now we know in Vancouver and in some places in Fraser Health, there have already been outreach vaccination programs going into shelters and congregated settings where we know people are at risk. In the Fraser Health region, we learned the other day that that's happening more on the east side of Fraser Health, because that's where they were seeing cases. In the downtown east side, we know there have been a lot of outbreaks in St. Paul's Hospital. So there have been some targeted strategic pop-up vaccination clinics for the downtown east side population, because we know that they frequent St. Paul's Hospital. So it's really to, again, try to maximize safety in that area. So this is where we're at. Now let's go into the next one. So phase 3 and 4, now we're expecting phase 3 to start in April. Now, again, this is all dependent, and like hopefully everything goes as expected, but then we're going to start going down by 5-year increments. Now, I want to highlight, there's this area that says clinically extremely vulnerable. And I think this might answer some of people's questions. And we don't have any more information past this, but I think it's good to go through. What about the people that are immunocompromised? What are the people about the people that have severe medical conditions? So let's look at a few of those on the next slide. So these are the people, and we're expecting that within when phase 3 starts, hopefully by April, that still will be 65 to 69-year-olds of people who are healthy. But there are people who the government is looking at who are considered clinically extremely vulnerable. These are people who have certain types of cancers, whether they're blood cancers or solid cancers, people who are receiving immunotherapy or other medications that would suppress their immune system to be able to fight off the illness, and also people who have severe respiratory conditions, severe asthma, severe bronchitis, and other, there's a few other ones there, people who are on dialysis. So there is thought to this. There is an appreciated need that, you know, not everyone who is 65 years old is the same, and that there are some 45 years old who might be sicker than other 80-year-olds. But we do know from a population base in BC that the people that have been dying are still in the 80 to 90-year-old. Majority of patients who have died in British Columbia have been in that age range. Not saying that that's the only metric, but that is part of what's been informing the strategy. So let's go on to the next slide. So what is the current BC strategy, knowing that we have limited supply? It's to protect the most vulnerable from serious illness and death. And that's that I hope gives a bit of insight into how BC has started their immunization strategy. And also part of it is, how do we sustain our healthcare capacity? How do we make sure that people can go into hospitals without risk of getting infected, or and make sure that people are getting their surgeries that they need? So right now, today, February 5th, there are 2 vaccines available in British Columbia, and we've heard a lot about them. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on it. We both know there are 2 vaccination series, and we both know that, we know that they're both in that 94 to 95% efficacy range after 2 doses. But I do want to spend a few minutes going over the whole two dose strategy. So let's go forward. And this is just talking about this is just a representation of a graph of what we were talking about. Long-term care facility, assisted living facility residents, 60% of deaths in BC. And we know that for patients who are over 80 years age, that has led to 71% of the deaths. So again, and we know from today that all long-term care facilities in BC have been offered vaccinations now, and there's been extremely high uptake, which is so reassuring to see. And we're seeing the impact of that already, where the number of outbreaks has dropped by almost 50% in long-term care settings just after a few weeks of starting this vaccination program. So it is working. So let's go forward. So the current plan is, this is a different representation, is by the end of March, to hopefully have received 792,000 doses. And even this morning, Minister Dix was saying that that we are still on pace for that. So, you know, fingers crossed. Hopefully, you know, we are dependent on the federal government here, and BC gets what's allocated to them. So if they are able to get this 792,000 doses, we look like we are still on track to get the end of phase 2 done. At least now, these numbers here. There's a cumulative tally of 572,608, and then there's a cumulative tally of 75%. So assuming that not everyone's going to be eligible to uptake the vaccine, we know that vaccine hesitancy is strong out there too. So this is at a target of 75%. That means that if 429,000 patients get their vaccine, they can actually get, most people will be able to get both doses, or eligible, they'll be enough to vaccinate them twice. but should we be doing that quickly? Then that's the crux of it. So let's go down. What do we know about vaccines? We know that for vaccines in general, it takes about 2 weeks to mount an immune response. The immune response to a vaccine dose. And we know that for most vaccines, and we have tons of experience of this with hepatitis vaccine, pneumococcal vaccines, and all the routine ones that we get, that the first dose is what gives us the most short-term protection. The second dose is always a booster. And we know that we have a lot of evidence that later on in life that booster, later on after getting it, that booster is even a stronger effect. This is why we give hepatitis B boosters at 1 year after the first one. And some of them are 6 months. We know that the shingles vaccine can be given 6 months after it. So when the manufacturer gave these recommendations of 21 to 28 days, this was the minimum interval. And there's been a lot of review of this, why they've extended it. First it was 35 days, and now BC in this last week or so has extended it up to 42 days. So let's go on to the next slide. So this has now been supported, and that these numbers are small, and I just really want to highlight that even 7 days after the Pfizer dose, we saw that there was 68% effectiveness there. 14 days after the first dose, you're getting already 92%, 92.6%. And the same with the Moderna vaccine. Within 2 weeks after the first dose, they were already seeing, again, around 92%. So you're getting the bang for your buck after that first dose there. And so we're seeing a short incremental rise. And we do know that based on vaccines and what we know, that boosters are needed. We still don't know how long that booster is going to last for. Is it going to be a year? Is it only going to be 6, 10 months? Don't know yet. Or is it going to be lifetime? We know that for a lot of vaccines, MMR vaccine, for example, 2 shots is good to cover you for life. So we don't know that much yet, but we do know that the first shot is doing amazing things. Let's go on to the next slide. And this is just looking at that a bit again. So again, 93, 95%. So let's go back. Let's go on to the next slide. So what's on the horizon? I just wanted to look at the AstraZeneca vaccine. And this is where we know that it's been submitted for Health Canada approval. We're expecting that this will be the next one that's available. We know it's much cheaper. It's very easy to store, and that if we are able to get it, that will help our vaccination strategy. And what we do also know is that we're seeing similar things, that they can even spread that out up to 3 months between the 2 doses, and that you're still getting as effective of a response. And this one's in around the 70% rate. And they actually have evidence to show that when they delayed that second dose from the 3 to 4 weeks over to 3 months, they were actually seeing a higher antibody result. And what does that mean? So what is the point of a vaccine? Is to prepare your immune system, to prime your immune system with antibodies to fight off an infection if the body is exposed to that. So what we're seeing is that by delaying it by 12 weeks, it was actually more effective. So this is just a thought, because I know we were all trying to figure out why is it changing so much, and even for us it's hard to keep up sometimes. So let's go on to the next slide. So this is just to say we have 3 independently randomized control trials. Now, when we look at evidence and how we appraise evidence in medical literature, we know randomized control trials are high levels of evidence, which gives us great confidence in results. So we have 3 different studies which are showing that a single dose of a vaccine is doing a huge amount, giving short-term protection, and that's what we need right now. So let's go on. And this is the next 2 slides are just showing that this has been now widely enforced. The WHO, European Medicines Agencies, Canadian National Advisory Committee are all open for this 42 days. So let's get on to more important stuff. Next slide again, please. And also the US CDC. So AstraZeneca. Now this is just from Maclean magazine a few days ago, and we know that just in the Lancet, which is a peer-reviewed medical journal, on February 1st, there was a preprint analysis that came out about the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, you guys may have heard of this. It's the Oxford vaccine. It's also a 2-dose, but we said 28 days, but also can be extended to 3 months. And what they're showing here is they updated the data. There was a bit of confusion with the data that came out in December, and it found that they looked at this updated data, and this is looking at Britain, Brazil, and South Africa. So you're looking at different areas where these variants are as well. because we don't have that data for Moderna and Pfizer. We don't know yet what their efficacy for the two vaccines are against these variants of concern. But when we looked at AstraZeneca, it was found to be 76% effective 3 weeks post-vaccination. And that protection lasted at day 90, so 3 months, and then it was about 82% effective. We know they haven't had any serious outcomes in their data. And now, so what would we know? This looks promising. And the other thing we don't know yet is about transmission. But they're saying that they're reporting a 67% reduction in transmission of the virus after the first dose. And this was in the UK arm where people were volunteering to get swabbed. So this is great because again, we don't know that about the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine yet either. We know that it's effective at protecting you, but we don't know if you can still pick it up and pass it on to someone else. We suspect that it will be effective against that, but we don't have that data. But we're starting to get some, updates on that now as well. And like we said, it's a cheap vaccine. It's a fraction of the cost of the other ones. And so we know in a global strategy, this is important as well. And there's just one more vaccine I want to talk about. Next slide, please, which is the Novavax vaccine. And this is from yesterday, also from McLean magazine. They did a great review of it. I haven't had a chance to actually look through this data myself, but what does this mean? What is Novavax? This is another company. This is also going to be a 2-dose vaccine. It's a spike protein-based vaccine, which is, we know that the spike protein is the protein that has been used by the coronavirus to actually get into cells. So it's mimicking that. So this is more of a traditional vaccination model that we've seen in previous vaccines as well. They just put in an application to Health Canada last week. There's phase 3 trial, which is still going on. And phase 3 means it's a large population size trial. Interim data shows that it's 89% effective, and they're showing that it's 95% effective against what we're calling now the old strain. But also the British strain, the B117, 85.6% effective, and the South African variant, they showed about B1351. So this is important too. So we're seeing that there is reduced efficacy in that South African population, and we know that the South African variant, and we know that variant is here. So this is why we all need to be mindful. And we know that Canada has ordered up to 76 million doses. I mean, I don't even know how many doses of every vaccine that Canada has ordered, but we know it's a lot. But we also know that it all depends on how much we're getting in, because we do not have that manufacturing capability right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sanghera now to go on to some more of the common and general FAQs, frequently asked questions you may have. So next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Narang, and a great overview of all of the current findings that we have, and a quick review of the different types of vaccines that are coming. So we do have a couple of questions that I want to quickly talk about. We'll answer these questions, but there's been a couple of questions in the chat and the question answer group there that I will quickly hit off a couple of things, and then we'll roll into our slides. So one of the attendees has asked the question, are the variants more virulent besides being more transmittable? And if so, will our current approved vaccines continue to be effective? The definition of virulent versus transmittable: transmission is transferring the virus from one person to the next. Virulence is how deadly that the virus can be. And so these variants are actually shown to be about 50 to 60% more transmittable. And so it's easier to catch. You may be able to catch it in a shorter time exposure to somebody, but they may not necessarily cause more deadly disease, right? So we still are at risk of having a bigger impact on society if we are allowing more transmission to occur. So that's the risk there. The other questions that came up were, do family physicians identify patients with extreme conditions to get the vaccine early on? We do have the capability to identify patients, but the provincial strategy seems to be more in line with that the government will have a list that they will, they won't contact people, but they will publicize how to access the vaccine in a public way. So hopefully that answers that question. And then there was another question about how long can we be protected from this virus after vaccination? So because we've just started vaccinating against this virus recently, and the studies were started last year, we do know that looking at the science behind it, that people have antibodies in their system anywhere from 6 to 9 months after receiving both injections. After one injection, we are starting to see the antibody numbers start to go down after 3 or 4 months. And so that's the reason for some of the vaccines requiring that second shot to give you a boost in your antibody production, as well as that longer protection. How long will it go on for? That's still being monitored, and it is being studied quite closely. And you know, we're learning as we go. Vaccines are still the safest way to move forward and get some protection. As we get more variants, we may need to have other booster doses going forward, as well as with different proteins. So those are those questions. Back to our frequently asked questions. When will we get access to these vaccines? Well, Dr. Narang did talk about the 4-phase approach that the province is using. That's as much information as we have right now. And as he mentioned earlier, because of the delay in some of the vaccine delivery, unfortunately, we are having to push the start of the community vaccinations from February into March, or in that ballpark. And you know, it can unfortunately change depending on what the delivery schedules are like. Where will we get the vaccine provided to us? Could it be a community site? Could it be a pharmacy? Could it be the doctor's clinic? We actually don't know right now. The plans are still being made up. Again, it depends on the type of vaccine that's going to be available to us. The first 2 vaccines that have been approved for use require specific refrigeration, especially the Pfizer vaccine requires refrigeration at about minus 70 to 80 degrees. So there's only a limited number of places that have that kind of refrigeration possible. And we may have to limit the large clinics based at the hospitals or large sites like that. And we're still working on that plan. As other vaccines come on board and the storage requirements are much easier to use, you may see, like as Dr. Narang had mentioned, the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Novavax one, which won't be coming till the end of the year. They will make it easier for us to start to give vaccine in the doctor's office or at the pharmacy. Adverse effects. They're actually the common side effects that you're going to see is obviously, and I can speak to this from firsthand, and both myself and Dr. Narang have been vaccinated because we care for long-term care patients. At the injection site, you will experience some discomfort, some achy shoulder muscles. I also experienced general fatigue for about 36 hours after the vaccine. Some people have also reported some mild fever and some congestion, mild nausea, and that seems to last for anywhere from 36 to 48 hours, and then it clears up. These are expected responses from any thing that causes our immune system to start to kick in to fight and respond with antibody production. This is our own immune system creating that. It's not an infection that's causing this. So the symptoms are short-lived though, because once your antibody production kicks in, the symptoms settle down. And there's questions about, can the mRNA vaccine or any of these COVID vaccines cause COVID-19? And the answer to that is absolutely not. The mRNA vaccine, it doesn't have any active virus particles in it. It just contains the synthesized protein that mimics the spike that allows entry into our body. So that's all you're getting is it's a small protein molecule. The immune system then recognizes that and creates antibodies against that protein. And so therefore it's impossible to get an infection from this. Even the other traditional type of vaccines that are coming, those are inactivated virus particles. So they can't actually cause an infection. You should be safe from that perspective. You will have a minor response to the actual the vaccine when your immune system is responding. Next slide, please. So the next question is that, or typically asked is, I'm recovering from another illness or an infectious illness like shingles or chickenpox. Will it be safe for me to get the vaccine? The answer is it is safe to receive the vaccine because you're not getting any active infectious particles being injected into your body. So therefore it is safe from that perspective. But my caution to you would be that if you are feeling sick and you feel infectious, wait for the infection to calm down, because you don't want to overtax your immune system by introducing another protein that it has to deal with. It's better to allow the body to deal with one infection, clear it out, and then be introduced to the proteins after, once you've recovered. The other thing is also keeping our community safe. If you are dealing with an infection yourself, you should not be going out and transmitting it across the community. Next slide. Is it okay to get other vaccinations around the same time as a COVID-19 vaccine? Can I get a different vaccination in between doses of the COVID-19 vaccine? And there are absolutely no concerns to receiving other vaccines during this time. When you receive a vaccine, it takes about 14 days for you to have a good antibody response to that vaccine. And then you should be able to be safe to receive any other vaccine after that. Most of the vaccines that are coming to us are getting their second dose extended rather than the 21-day initial recommendations that were out there. We're seeing that it's still safe to give the vaccine at 42 days. And in the case of the AstraZeneca vaccine, there seems to be a real solid case to delay the second shot to 3 months. So my job puts me at higher risk of getting COVID-19, but it's not listed in the first phases. Will I get the vaccine earlier than other people? Currently, we are limited in the number of people that we can vaccinate quickly. We would love to prioritize everybody that has any risk of a serious health complication or based on their job risk. But because of the delay in vaccines coming to us, we are focusing on the people that are at the highest risk of either death or severe illness. And so those people will be prioritized. As we start to get delivery of more vaccine, we will then start to have the opportunity, at least, to prioritize people at higher risk jobs. And so stay tuned. We will have a better answer for that. Was the development of the COVID-19 vaccines rushed or pushed through? And do we really know it's safe? This is a very, very good question, and I'm asked this question quite frequently. The mRNA vaccine technology has actually been in use for the last 10 to 20 years. It's been used for treatment of cancers. It's being used in gene therapy. It's being used for autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, colitis, those kind of diseases. So we've got a good sense of how this technology works. And so it's safe from that perspective. And we know that it does a really, really good job. And in fact, we're changing the way that cancer treatments are occurring and making chemotherapy with this type of technology much safer than it has been in the past. And so we were able to leverage this new this approach that we've been studying for the last 10 to 20 years and applying it to a vaccine approach and delivering these proteins to get a really good robust antibody production going. So, and Dr. Narang had presented the data that showed that we are getting somewhere 92 to 95% of effectiveness against the infections. That's pretty high compared to previous vaccines that have been delivered, say, like our flu shots, which are typically around the 60 to 70% effectiveness mark. So we're getting a much more robust response with even less risk for side effects. So we know it's safe from that perspective. The other thing that we all have to understand is that this pandemic has impacted the whole world. Every single government, every single country, every single person has been impacted by this. So there's been a global push to get a response to this virus that's upended our lives. And so there have been billions and billions of dollars of money that's been put towards research. There's been collaboration around the world like we've never had before. There's no competition in this. It's all about making sure that the world can get back on its feet and all of us can start living our life the way that we want to. So that collaboration and the ability to access research money the way that's been provided has allowed people to work at a way faster rate. We've accelerated the development of and testing of vaccines from usually things that take many years to do to a matter of 6 to 12 months. So, and there's more vaccines that are continuing to be developed. Some of their trials are continuing, and we'll see more vaccines being announced for approval within the next 6 months. So I've had reactions to a vaccine before. Is it safe for me to get the COVID-19 vaccine? So my suggestion to you would be to discuss with your physician what kind of reaction you've had to a vaccine before. The mRNA vaccines that are been approved, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, the only reactions that we've seen for people are where they have a specific allergy to a compound called polyethylene glycol. That's one of the components in this, in these vaccines, and those are the patients that have an allergy to that. They're the only ones that have seemed to have really severe side effects, and it's an anaphylactic type of response where your lips swell up, your breathing may become difficult, and you need immediate attention with an EpiPen. Other allergies like to eggs or to other animal products, nuts, they don't seem to impact this vaccine's allergy or any kind of response that you might have had before. So I would say it's safe, but please have a discussion with your family physician if you have any concerns about any allergies. Allergies to grass, pollen, other environmental allergies are not going to impact this vaccine causing any allergies for you. And I think it's on the next slide. So if we go on the next slide, I'll continue with, so polyethylene glycol for everybody is a chemical that's fairly common out there. It's available in some makeup products. If women have been wearing lipstick, you may find that's one of the ingredients in the lipstick. It's also found in some laxatives like Restoralax, Metamucil, Peglax, Go Light. If you've ever gone for colonoscopy, you would have used those kind of products. It's also found in some processed foods. So the polyethylene glycol is out there, and we've been using it in various different products very safely and haven't had any issues in the past. And so I would recommend that if you still are concerned, have a chat with your family physician. The next question is, once I'm vaccinated, do I still have to worry about public health measures like wearing a mask and social distancing? So when you get vaccinated, it takes a minimum of 2 weeks for you to actually get a robust antibody production. So there have been reports of people complaining that, oh, I got the vaccine yesterday and now today I'm positive for COVID-19. You unfortunately have not got an antibody production high enough to protect you at that point, and you are at risk of catching the COVID-19 virus until you've got about a really high level of antibody production. So you need to continue to protect yourself for the next 2 weeks before you can say, okay, I'm safe right now. But at that point, you're still only at the most 92% protected. And so there's a still 5 to 8% chance that you could pick up a COVID-19 virus from your surroundings. So I would still continue to recommend, until we have 80 to 90% of the population vaccinated, we need to continue with the measures that we have in place right now. So you still need to maintain your physical distancing, you still need to wear a mask, and you still need to continue with your hand hygiene. On top of that, we also have this risk of the variants coming through. So these variants will also impact your ability to protect yourself. Right, so and we'll talk about that on a later slide. Next slide. So if I have mild to severe allergies, but not to polyethylene glycol, is COVID-19 vaccine safe? I've just talked about that before. And if you have allergies to antibiotics or other medications, that does not impact the safety of the COVID-19 vaccine to you. Next slide. Do I have to go to a clinic to get vaccinated, or can they come to me? Will there be mobile clinics for people with accessibility issues or people who live in remote areas? So people that live in remote areas are being provided with the Moderna vaccine, which is easier to transport out there. So we will, the province is providing the vaccine to those locations. We are trying to find large spaces where we can give the vaccine here in the Lower Mainland, and we're looking at school gymnasiums, community centers, etc., and large clinics. And so we will come up with a plan. Now, there will be some people that may have difficulty getting access to those locations, and there are plans in place to come up with a strategy for them. There may be some home care nurses that may be able to visit to each individual person at home that is absolutely unable to leave their home, and the vaccine will be provided to them there. Are there any long-term side effects caused by the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines? So far, we've been testing these vaccines since last March, I believe, when the initial studies started to come out, and we've been following people since then. And we have not seen any long-term side effects of the mRNA vaccines. And the protein that's delivered in the vaccine, it's usually broken down within about 2 weeks and it's out of your system. And in some cases, less than a week. How long after COVID-19 is it safe to get vaccinated? So if you're currently infected and you're experiencing symptoms, it's probably not a great idea. Again, same answer as what I had talked about earlier. You have a current infection, your immune system is busy, give it a chance, let it fight off the infection, recover, and then once you're fully recovered and you're no longer infectious, then you can go ahead and get your vaccine. You also, you will have fewer risks to yourself as well as to the public when you go out of your house. So this is actually a very important question that have been asked many, many times, where do people who are pregnant, trying to get pregnant or breastfeeding have safety concerns with the vaccine? The studies that were done initially did not actually look into that initial data that way, but subsequent continued studies have looked at examples of where physicians and nurses that are pregnant or breastfeeding have received the vaccine. And I can safely say that the Canadian Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology and the National Advisory Committee on Immunization have all advised that pregnant and breastfeeding women should be offered the vaccine. It is safe, and in fact, it will also be safe for your child as well, because as a pregnant lady is producing antibodies for herself, she's also passing those antibodies over to her baby as well for protection. The only thing that still needs to be discussed somewhat is the impact in early pregnancy, and so that's being studied still. So the jury is still out on that one, and we will have more data as that data comes in. But I would consider it to be safe for now. Is it safe for me to get a COVID-19 vaccine if I am immunocompromised from treatment or illness? And what if I have an autoimmune disease? So the vaccines that have been approved, the two mRNA ones, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, they do not have any active infectious particles. So if you are immunocompromised from any other illness or treatment, it's actually recommended for you to get the vaccine because it's safe. It will not cause any infections, and it will actually offer you more protection. And if you have an autoimmune disease, you may actually be at more risk from catching the COVID-19 infection, because that the infection itself is not just a respiratory virus, but it also causes inflammation. And we are starting to see some impact on autoimmune disease in the long term after a patient has had COVID-19 infection itself, not so much about the actual the vaccine. If you do have questions, though, please talk to your autoimmune disease specialist or your family physician. All right. Do we have any other questions that have not been answered yet?
Yeah, I think there's a few questions that we could speak to. I think that we've tried to answer some of them in the chat, but I think it might be a good idea just to kind of walk through a couple of them. And I think that there is, and a number of them are around that inevitable question: where am I going to be able to get this vaccine and when? And I think you've answered a little bit, but there was a question around, will I be able to get it through my local Shoppers Drug Mart, and will my family doctor be able to vaccinate me at some point?
Yeah, so the answer to that is we really don't know. And it also depends on the type of vaccine that's coming out. So right now we have the 2 mRNA vaccines. We don't have enough of the Moderna one to say, yes, we could deliver that in any location. The Pfizer vaccine requires a very, very low temperature refrigeration. So there's a limitation from that aspect of storage where we can give that vaccine.
Great. I guess there's a question that comes up around, we have to get two doses. Is there a certain level of precaution that we need to maintain after we've had the first dose? Or in terms of worrying about spreading, do we need to take the same precaution that we took before we were vaccinated?
Yes. So go ahead, Dr. Narang.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, yeah, just 100%. And we did make that, like, there's two aspects to it. One, it takes time for your body to develop immunity. Two, I guess a few points. There are variants of concern that are around right now, and we don't know how it's going to work. So we know that there are now 28 cases of these variants of concern here in the lower main, in British Columbia. Don't know exactly where. But we know that you could pick up that variant, and then this vaccine might have less efficacy against that. And then, even if you are, like, best case scenario, 95% covered, there's still the 5% chance that you're in that 5% range that it didn't work for. So there's a lot of reasons why we still need to be cautious. And that's why the goal right now is all the other things we're doing is to bring that level in the community so low that if it does pop up somewhere, let's say one of these variants pops up, that the public health, the contact tracing can get on that so quickly that it can stop it from affecting you.
Yeah. And just in terms of, I know this is these unknowns, but are we starting to learn more, or is the research starting to show more about what kind of a timeline the efficacy will have on these vaccines? Or is this just basically we need to continue to test as we go along?
Well, we're learning more about the virus and the vaccines as we move along. So as time is going on, we're seeing that protection being extended further and further, especially after the second dose. It's really important to make sure that people receive that second dose to increase the length of time that they have protection. So that first dose gives you 90 to 92% protection, but we're starting to see the protection wane after 4 to 6 months. So if you get that second dose at that 42-day mark, or in the case of the AstraZeneca vaccine at the 3-month mark, then we know that the protection will be extended longer. How much longer? We'll know as time goes on, because we're still learning, and we're seeing that as each month goes by, that time gets pushed out further and further and further. And so I can guarantee 100% that your protection will be at a 95% up till about 6 to 8 months. Ask me in a year and I'll tell you how much longer it will be at that point.
Yeah, and I guess that's the other piece is, as we have these variants and mutations, they must, just like with the flu vaccine, they must be continually looking at how they'll need to adapt the vaccine to meet the variants.
And what we do know is that both Pfizer and Moderna have ongoing trials going, and they're going to be doing it for 2 years at least.
Yeah.
So there was
data coming in.
Yeah, and there was a question from in the audience here about if people get the COVID-19 infection, is there some protection after that? So what we're noticing from COVID-19 infection itself, and it depends on how severe an infection you had. With milder infections, the antibody production is only lasting for about 3 or 4 months. So it is highly advised that even if you've had a COVID-19 infection, it's better for you overall to go ahead and get a COVID-19 vaccine as well to get that longer term protection.
And I know this is a conversation about vaccines, but I think it kind of you kind of introduced that. There's also an awful lot of research being done around the kind of medication that will reduce the severity of COVID and make it less dangerous. Is that coming more into play now?
I can speak on that. There are medications that have been looked at. There was a specific question about a medication called Ivermectin, and that's a medication that's been used for other types of infectious diseases in the past. What we do know is we don't have evidence enough to support it right now. And also with any medication, and I think this is something we always need to keep in mind, that every medication has what we call a therapeutic window. This is the kind of the optimal amount of medication to give that gives you benefit, but doesn't give you side effects. And what we do know about ivermectin is that window is very tight. And so it would be a very difficult medication to apply to a population basis. And so that it's not really, the latest I've heard is it's not something that's in the pipeline locally. There has been, and this is something we have to always be critical about when we hear from media and on our WhatsApp channels and on random websites, because there's a lot of people looking at different types of therapies, whether they're medical therapies, whether they're alternative therapies, whether they're natural therapies. And what we do know is there's not a lot of evidence on treatment for patients in the outpatient setting. And that's for people who, and we know majority of people of COVID who get COVID are going to have minor symptoms. And so what we don't know is how do we target those people who we think are getting minor symptoms and actually get them on a medication that will help prevent them from getting sicker. And nothing that we have so far has been shown to do that.
But obviously they continue to work on that. Thank you.
Ongoing or 100%.
Yeah. I guess, and we just got a minute or two left here, but I think the one question that we haven't asked, and I think it's often on people's minds, how do I convince my relative, neighbor, my naysayer that they need to get the vaccine? What story can I tell that will convince people that this is the right thing to do?
Well, there's an often repeated statement that none of us are safe until we're all safe. So that's the only way to go about thinking about this. We all need to be vaccinated for all of us to be safe. There in the question answer, there was somebody had asked the question, when is it safe to see my grandchild after the first dose? It's only safe after everyone's both parties have had their second doses. That's when you're safe. And also public health guidelines are allowing for us to start to be more social. Right now, up to the end of February, we are being asked to continue to limit our contacts to immediate household contact, even if you've been vaccinated. And that's as far as I'm willing to go on that one.
Great.
So there's minimal risk to people from the vaccines. There's a big upside benefit that as we get more and more people vaccinated, the more we can start to socialize, the more we can get our businesses back on track, people can go back to work, people can start to live without having to wear a mask. And that's only going to happen when we get to 90% coverage by the vaccine.
Great. So just before we leave, Dr. Sanghera, Dr. Narang, do you have any final things you'd like to add?
Dr. Narang?
Sure. Actually, there is one question that I saw that I was hoping to get to, which this should have been on the first slide. The vaccine is free. There's no cost to you getting it. The government has a commitment, and to make sure everyone who wants a vaccine has access to it. And so that's the principle that we're operating under. So there should be no cost to you. And if anyone tries to sell you a vaccine, just say no.
Yeah, come talk to your family physician and get the vaccine, get some appropriate guidance as to where to go get it. We will know more about where to access these vaccines and how to sign up for a dose yourself. And your family physicians will be supporting you throughout this whole thing.
Great. And we do believe that this won't be the last of these sessions. And in fact, we will have a session upcoming, I think, on February the 18th in Mandarin. And it's likely as we learn more, because as I think we've all learned at this point, the world of COVID is ever changing. So we'll certainly continue to hold these kind of sessions and be able to try to share as much information as we can. I really want to thank Dr. Sanghera and Dr. Narang. It was wonderful to have you. I do want to mention to the participants that there will be a recording of this session available to you, and also posted on the website, so that you can point it to your friends and to your relatives, and maybe to some of those naysayers, to help them so that you don't have to argue with them. You can say, no, listen, here it is. And you've got some factual information to work with. Manny, maybe if you can put up some of the other information on the screen for us, that would be great. The www.burnabykoronavirus.com website has lots of information about how to get both medical clinical support and social supports. And again, if there have been either questions that come up for you, that you're certainly welcome to send them via email, and we'll do our best to get them answered afterward. But with that, and do we have another little ad as well, Manny? I think we might have one more. Oh, there we go. Yeah, but thank you. And we have another doc talk coming up on healthy aging and avoiding frailty, which is really timely. I think it's particularly right now for folks who are seniors and caregivers and family. It's a harder time to age, and there's some good advice and some good supports that are out there. So if you or someone in your family would benefit from that, we'd certainly welcome you to that as well. So with that, again, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for participating. And again, to Dr. Narang and Dr. Sanghera, it's been great, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.